I think a day later, this still hasn't sunk in. Ole Miss baseball is national champs. I watched my first Ole Miss game in 1982, 40 years ago. Man, it's fantastic. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I am your host, Stephen Willis. Thank you very much for tuning in. As you can see below, my Twitter handle is @TheStephenWillis. I tweet about Ole Miss stuff. I tweet about other stuff. Everybody's perspective is welcome, wanted, and I'm allowed to have my own. But today, before we get started, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Also, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Tune into YouTube and see us. Basically, subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications when new videos get put up. And, of course, upvote the video itself. You guys were fantastic during Omaha Live. I want that energy some more. I'm trying to figure out how we can do this more. It's really fun to do. I'm trying to figure out how we can make this a more regular thing. We're going to do post-game live during football season to where we can continue to grow it. And I'm ready for that to be really cool. And that needs to happen. We got about 3 weeks of off season before SEC Media Days. So we're going to talk about baseball a couple times, but we're going to get back to normal. We've done baseball for the last 2 weeks. It was deserved. It was warranted. We are going to get back to normal. And we're going to start the one segment of football a day back today. We're going to tell you a little bit about Jaden Rashada and the rumors going on down in Florida. It's absolutely ludicrous if you haven't been paying attention, which you probably haven't. But we'll start off with Ole Miss being the national champion. Yes, in baseball. That happened. Ole Miss is the national champion in baseball. And this team will go down as being remembered as an unbelievable collection of players. And we'll talk about them in the second segment a little bit. But how good do you feel for Mike Bianco today? Whenever Steve Young joked about the Joe Montana monkey coming off of his back and he was like, oh, take it off, and he looked really silly on TV and all of that stuff, this is an example of a monkey coming off of his back. Mike Bianco, for all the good that he has done, he has walked around in the shadow of Skip Bertman in his own mind. I'm not talking about Ole Miss. I'm just talking about in his own mind. He's walked around in the shadow of Skip Bertman because he was hyper successful at LSU. And that's how he judges himself. That's the level that he wants to be at. LSU during the 90s is where he wants to be. And the fact that it's taken him 22 years to get here, is probably really, really rewarding, but it's also hyper frustrating. So, you look at this run. This was almost like a revenge tour the last 22 years, where in a movie you had to face all your demons coming back. It was kind of like that. Miami and Arizona in the regional took them out. Southern Miss in the Super Regional swept them 15-0 combined. Arkansas in the College World Series. And I'm going to take credit for this, an Augie Garrido disciple in Oklahoma. Who Skip Johnson, by the way, wished Mike Bianco said Ole Miss was warned. It was a very classy post, a very classy dude. And Oklahoma played well. They just, like we said probably 15 times during this postseason, they just ran into a buzzsaw. That's it. And it's amazing the different players that stepped up in different games. And we're going to talk about that in the second segment as well. Everybody had a game. And Jacob Gonzalez, who had a difficult College World Series up until this point, was the star of Game 2. 3 for 4, 3 out of the 6 hits, 2 out of the team's runs drove in. Scored one himself, so he's responsible for 3 of the 4. Ole Miss doesn't win that game without Jacob Gonzalez. Ole Miss probably doesn't win that game if they leave that other pitcher in. Ole Miss got a call in that game of base runner interference, a call that they normally don't get. It seemed to all be stacking up in favor of the Rebels yesterday, and it just didn't look like it. It was such a pitcher's duel. But that was the game that Ole Miss wanted to play. That's the game that they've wanted to play this whole tournament. I think they have the 4th best ERA in a pitching staff since like 98 in this tournament. It's like 25 years. It's absolutely ridiculous. They completely dominated this College World Series. They dominated the Super Regional. They dominated the Regional. All through postseason, they went straight through. This is as easy as it's going to get, Ole Miss fans. This team was one loss where a base hit could have won it away from being in a completely different situation to go straight through, just breeze straight through. But the bases loaded, no outs against Arkansas. Ole Miss ended up dropping that game, but they ended up getting them the next day. And then they got Oklahoma 2 days ago. And then they got Oklahoma yesterday. And now they're probably on a plane flight home, extremely happy. All of their goals have been met, with the exception of maybe something to do with the SEC. But as we've learned, and I hope everybody has learned, really, that the SEC tournament in Hoover just does not matter at all. If anything, it could be a detriment. And I know we like Hoover and his content and his SEC network and all of this. It's a tough place to be. Ole Miss wins the SEC tournament, catches fire every year, and struggles in the regionals and super regionals. They run out of gas. They go one and done in Hoover this year. And they go all the way through and win the national championship. This is a big thing. Remember, Mike Bianco sees himself as his goals, wants to be like Skip Bertman was at LSU. That's where he wants to be. And after this College World Series run, nobody can talk about advancement opportunities again. Nobody. They've won regionals. We won't even count the regional. That Arizona 22-6, we will not even count. Southern Miss, they took care of business, 5-0. Against Arkansas, they lost one, they won the next, 2-1. Against Oklahoma in the ultimate advancement opportunity, the one that he's 1-0 with a game to win the national championship, he won the game. That talking point is retired forever. The We Are Ole Miss talking point is retired forever. If anybody says either of those two things, immediately stop listening to them. Be happy. Enjoy this. This is an unbelievable, joyous occasion. If you just enjoyed the ride of the season and didn't just jump to conclusions in the middle, which several people did, but if you just watched it, this was an unbelievably fun baseball season. It was. Even on a Wednesday night, watching Ole Miss and SEMO play, and SEMO almost run-ruling Ole Miss, this was a fun season. They almost run-ruled the national champions. And that shows you exactly what confidence means to a team. This is the perfect encapsulation of confidence. They were confident at the beginning of the season. Tennessee, what Tennessee did to Ole Miss is not fair. It destroyed their confidence to the point where they're getting swept by Alabama at home. They just didn't have it for 4 or 5 weeks in the season. Then, against Arkansas, it's like, this is a good team, and we're kind of keeping them in bay, and we could have swept them. And then they sweep Missouri, and then they sweep LSU. And they win the one game against Texas A&M they obviously had to do. Everybody talks about they almost didn't make it, but they did. And that game against A&M is the reason they got in. And they went down to Miami, and Peyton Chatagnier had like 5 RBIs in the first game. And they beat Arizona like 7-4. And then they got their matchup against Miami. Looking back on it, it was probably the second most important matchup of the tournament. Miami pitched their ace, Palmquist. absolutely nails. Tim Elko hits a 2-run double in like the 7th inning or 8th inning, and they win 2-1. Brandon Johnson nails, comes in, shuts it down. They just beat the brakes off Arizona after that. It's 22-6. Against Southern Miss, they had a fireballer that the moment kind of got to him early. And in the 6th inning, either he got hit with a ball or something like that. In the 6th inning, Ole Miss was able to just, Southern kept playing with the infield in, and Ole Miss just kept hitting them like 6-7 runs. Ended up winning the game 10-0. Then they beat their ace, Tanner Hall, which is absolutely phenomenal pitcher, 5-0, and they get to the College World Series. So at that point, everybody's like, well, job done, even me included. But this team, this special team, didn't think like that. And they went in against Auburn. And Auburn, looking back in hindsight, was probably the right opponent for Ole Miss to get their feet wet in this tournament. That was the perfect first game. I don't know how I would have taken it if they'd have gotten Stanford in the first game, for instance. But they got Auburn. And they were able to come through, and Dylan DeLucia just absolutely dealt. He was the most outstanding player in the tournament. And then in the second game against Arkansas, they dealt again. I think they won 13-5. And all of a sudden, Arkansas's in the loser's bracket. And they have to go through Auburn. And then they get Ole Miss again, and they have to beat them twice. And Arkansas does beat Ole Miss once. That's the game where Ole Miss had the bases loaded with no outs in the ninth. Ole Miss wasn't able to get the key hit in that moment. Then DeLucia came back on Thursday. Everybody was worried about that. He absolutely dealt. 2-0 shutout, complete game. It was absolutely the greatest pitching performance in Ole Miss history. And then Jack Doherty gets the game 1 start and was just perfect through 5 innings. It's like, wow, what is going on? And then Hunter Elliott got the ball. Everybody was confident. Great pitching outing from the Oklahoma kid. But they went to their closer. The moment was too big for that closer, I think. I think the catcher was calling for one thing, and the pitcher was seeing something else. His heartbeat must have been through his head. 2 pass balls, 2 wild pitches, however you want to say them. And Ole Miss was able to win that game 4-2. So it's absolutely phenomenal. Anyway, I want to tell you a little bit about betonline.net real quick. BetOnline.net is your number 1 source for all your betting needs and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcast, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including iTunes. So do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review and say whatever you want to say. Just leave us a 5-star review. We would appreciate it. Basically what it'll do, the more 5-star reviews and the higher rating it is, it shows up higher in the search in the iTunes algorithm, meaning people can more easily find this show. So a 5-star review would be very helpful, and we'd appreciate it. So we basically did a recap in the first segment. Now, one thing that was really cool about this College World Series is all of the major players had major performances in a College World Series. Whether it was Justin Bench with 4 hits, whether it was Tim Elko hitting the home runs, 4 or 5 hits actually. Kevin Graham was absolutely nails against Arkansas in the game that ended up being the winner who's going to win the national championship. And the first game against Auburn, he really came through in both of those. Jacob Gonzalez in the game too, absolutely came through. Kemp Alderman had a big game as well. Peyton Chatagnier had a big game as well. T.J. McCants with the home run and the rally starter in game 1 and 2. He was the College World Series Finals hero. Players had big moments in this tournament, and it was really kind of cool to see, especially for people like Tim Elko, Justin Bench, and Kevin Graham, who came back for just this reason. Now, we all said it was for them to get to Omaha. What do we know? But think about the feeling they have right now and what's going through. Because not only did they get there, they all performed. They did what they had to do. The moment was not too big. They were incredibly loose. And people are going to talk about how, this is the team that won it all. This is the team. And the point is, it doesn't really matter. Derek Vandegrift, we're going to have him on later in the week when he gets back to Mississippi from Omaha. And we're going to have Kara on and we're going to talk about their Omaha experience. So you got to put up with me for a little bit before then, but we're going to get them as well. But it was really encouraging to see just a loose team that feels like they just weren't pressing. In the middle of the year, when their pitching was down and they were trying to hit 10-run home runs and all of that was happening, you could just see the confidence level was down. They got walked off like 4 times this year. I mean, their confidence level was really low. But if you actually look at the baseball games, they were usually in it, with the exception of the Tennessee series. And the SEC West, everybody was fooled by the SEC West because so many of the higher teams had to play Tennessee this year. And Tennessee, they didn't make it. They got beat by Notre Dame, and almost, you might even say good for them or whatever. But they affected records of the teams they played. The teams that ended up winning the SEC West, Texas A&M, did not play Tennessee. There's several teams that did not play Tennessee that ended up being higher in the standings than they would normally be. Why is that? Because Tennessee was so good and they were beating everybody. So that game was probably the difference. That series was probably the difference between Ole Miss going 16-14 and 14-16, honestly. And we can talk about Alabama and everything going on as well, but I'm just saying. So it's really cool that they came back and was able to put this together. It was a weird season. It absolutely was. But it was a season that they pulled it together and was able to win it. Really important stuff. Really big time stuff. High level Mike Bianco stuff. It's unbelievable. Then, you look at the kids that transferred in. John Gaddis and Jack Washburn. Jack Washburn from Oregon State. John Gaddis from Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and he transferred in specifically to play in the College World Series. Out of all the teams that offered him and places he could go, he felt the best chance for him to get to Omaha was in Ole Miss. That's a pretty cool feeling for somebody that has been there once in 8 years. But they actually did it. And when John Gaddis got the ball against Arkansas in that crucial bracket final game, he was absolute nails. Jack Washburn was nails. They both put out great performances. That's the amazing thing about this run. There's not too many situations where you can look at it and it's like, well, he just didn't have it. He tried his best. It just didn't work today. And that just didn't happen. John Gaddis and Jack Washburn came in and did exactly what they were brought in to do. Exactly why they were recruited in the transfer portal to Ole Miss. They did it. John Gaddis was so good against Arkansas, he ran out there against Oklahoma and saved Ole Miss's bacon. Sunday. It's crazy to think about. That was such a weird run. If you go back to the Central Florida series, when we were all introduced to Dylan DeLucia, by the way, that was the series where he made his appearance and showed himself to the world. If you go back and look at how this played out, this was so bizarre. Enjoy every second of this, guys. Something like this is never going to happen again. Ole Miss might win another national championship. They're not going to win one like this. They're not going to win one like this. It is absolutely crazy. And then you look at the freshmen, Mason Nichols, big performance against Arkansas. Hunter Elliot, absolute nails. all College World Series. The moment was not too big for him. He looked completely in control. And, yeah, the future's in good hands with him. I think Mason Nichols is probably going to be a starter. As soon as he develops a third pitch, he's probably working on a change right now. But it's phenomenal. It really is. And this is the moment where that monkey goes off of Mike Bianco's back. And he can kind of do things the way he wants to do it. Because there is no pressure anymore. He did the thing. Nobody can take it away from him, although some people do. And we'll get on to them a little bit later on, but we're not going to do it right now because this has just been a phenomenal run. And honestly, this baseball team and Mike Bianco deserves the credit. But I've got feelings that go all the way back to the David Cutcliffe situation about what goes on around the football program and all that. And they tried to do another coup and it did not work. So we will talk about that in a later date, but not right now because these kids, they deserve it. They enjoy it. Fans enjoy this. A national championship in the Big Three. And especially, I'm not a trash talking person. I don't believe in it. But after what went down with Hugh Freeze and Dan Mullen and Mississippi State and Leo Lewis and all of that, to win a national championship the very next year after Mississippi State crossed the threshold of something they've been trying to win for, they give Bianco grief. They've been trying to do this since the mid-'80s. Will Clark and Palmero, that was supposedly the best college baseball team in the tournament. And they went out. They finally broke through last year, and they thought they were going to have something to crow about forever. The very next year, Ole Miss does it. It's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Anyway, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to tell you a little bit about the saga that's going on with Jaden Rashada. It's kind of cool, kind of interesting, and exactly why I don't think he was going to be at Ole Miss, really. Because he is now the leader in, I guess, salary, I don't know what you call it, on the board. So, we'll be right back. All right, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Subscribe to YouTube, hit the bell on YouTube, and, of course, upvote the video itself. We would appreciate it. It will be quite awesome. Now, we're going to get back a little bit. We're going to slowly work into a normal show routine. So we're going to do a little football today, which we normally do every day. Because, like I said, if you look at our numbers, 90% of our fan base is football only. And then there's like 5%, 10%, or 7% baseball, and then like 3% everything. Well, now, that's probably closer to 17%, 20% of the fan base is football and baseball. That's what this run did. And probably that's the most important part of this whole thing. They actually grew the game by doing this. And this run got people, and I received text messages from people I never talked to, talking Ole Miss baseball. Every now and then I'd get a football post, but that's the way it worked. All these people did it. Now we need to wait and see exactly what this looks like in the future. Is this event driven? Is this run driven? Or in February, will they be paying attention? We need to see if they do that. But even if they're not paying attention in February, they'll be paying attention when the tournament hits. It's just a different level fan. There's different guys in the football fandom. There's different ways to do this. There is no right way. There is no super fan. You don't have more fan cred than the next one because for whatever reason you suffered more than they did. I mean, this is all silly stuff. But I say this to lead to my next point. There is a collective war going on in Florida, and it started over Jaden Rashada. Jaden Rashada is rumored to be making $9.1 million in NIL money. That's 1.5 more than Nico. And it is the result of these collective wars. Florida and Miami going back and forth trying to one-up each other. To put this in perspective, if Ole Miss and state collectives were going in on a top recruit, it was going to one of those schools, and the highest bidder gets it, somebody would be willing to make that run. So the Miami collective and the Florida collective kept bidding up and up. And now I think we understand why Jaden Rashada delayed his announcement. Because the money was going back and forth. And it was probably smart to delay that announcement. Because he's a kid that could be very special. He's a good quarterback. But Ole Miss can't pay $9.5 million for anybody. And if you think they can, you're fooling yourself. They can't pay $8 million for a quarterback. They could probably get in the six-ish range. But as the market sits right now, quarterbacks are pricing higher than that. Now, we haven't had a bust at the quarterback position. None of the stuff that's going to control the markets has happened. So whenever that happens, it could come down and it could get into a more manageable range. But right now, it's like we're drinking from the fire hose with NIL. And there's excited people that are doing this. And I do this comparison all the time. NIL is like NFTs. 3 years ago, an NFT of a Bored Ape was going for $300,000. That same Bored Ape just got resold for like $115. Let the market do what the market needs to do. Do not put your thumbs on the scales. That's the thing that drives me crazy about everybody. When you don't get your way, you want to start putting your thumb to where you get the desired outcome. And you can't do that. That's not the way the market works. And, 9.5, that's probably too much money. But remember, nobody really needs to freak out about this. Because Ole Miss has been a portal school. They have a Gatorade National Player of the Year on campus right now. And they're recruiting through the transfer portal for just this reason. Give Lane Kiffin all the credit in the world. They're not going to throw money away. They're not going to reach. They are going to go in the portal. And when 18 and 19-year-old stuff happens, which is always going to happen, see Zach Evans, see Jackson Dart, see Michael Trigg, all of those guys, when that happens, Ole Miss is going to be available right there in the transfer portal. Ole Miss will be the school that gave Jaden Rashada's brother a scholarship offer to play SEC football. All of this stuff will be remembered after the influx of this high school recruiting is done. Everybody talks about high school recruiting. It's because they need high school recruiting to sell subscriptions to their service. They understand it. There's a signing day. You can build to it. There's a formula to high school recruiting and coverage of it. I worked at Rivals for a decade. I know this. That early signing day actually did damage to them, but the early signing day and the late signing day, they figured out a way to make it work. And now they're trying to figure out the transfer portal that can go all over. There's not a signing day that they can point to. It could happen any day. And what it requires is these recruiting people to work ungodly hours because there's so much there. And people in the transfer portal, they lie about what is going on because they've played this game before. They understand that they know who has burned them, who has not. So Ole Miss is sitting right back there in the transfer portal, just waiting to see what happens. If nothing happens, nothing happens. But if it does, we're here. Like I said, in recruiting, the goal is to finish in the top 2. It's not to win the war anymore. It's to finish in the top 2. Either get him to start with or get him when he transfers. That is the whole goal. But $9.5 million potentially for Jaden Rashada. That's absolute lunacy for a college quarterback. And there's going to probably be more shots fired between the Florida collective and the Miami collective. And whenever Florida State gets up and going, Florida's about to become ridiculous. Because down here, they do throw money around. And yeah. And remember, it's all legal. It's all above board. the guy from Miami and his collective or whatever signs players from there, FIU, FAU. It's not just Miami schools. It's more about the community. It's a smart move. He might sign NIL deals at FAU for $200, and the kid at Miami is getting $14 million, but he is signing from other schools. It is what it is. So it should be a lot of fun. This is our Get Back to Normal show. Tomorrow we will continue to get back to normal, and we're going to have Kara McCutcheon and Derek Vandegrift to talk about their Omaha experience at some point when they get back to Texas and Mississippi, respectively. Anyway, get more on the SEC by making Locked On SEC your second listen every day. Host Chris Gordy and the local experts of Locked On take you across the SEC in 30 minutes. Make Locked On SEC your second listen. Locked On SEC. Anyway, it's been a lot of fun getting back to normal today. Enjoy this, people. This does not happen often. And how do I know that? This is the first time this has happened in my lifetime. So, enjoy this. No matter what. Because it's really, really cool. And we really, really deserve it. Anyway, see you tomorrow. Peace.